कभी करती हैं मुलाकातें, कभी करती हैं मुलाकातें, कभी यादों में बरसातें, किताबें करती हैं बातें, किताबें करती हैं बातें। मन की गहरी झील में कूद जाती हैं कभी, सोच के दरिया के संग संग बहती जाती हैं कभी। चाहे शाम हो या हो रातें, किताबें करती हैं बातें।
Hello and welcome to our program. On our show today, the young and sparkling author, Ira Trivedi. Ira, welcome to the program.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me here.
4 years of intensive research, traveling across the country, and you put together a vision of India in love. Let's start with that.
This book, yes, it took me 4 years. I traveled to 15 cities, interviewed over 600 people to put this together. In fact, the first 7 months, 8 months was spent just seeing if I even had a book. If there was one book or 2 books or 3 books, I really had to systematically analyze, because marriage, sexuality, sex, love, these are all huge topics. They're all volumes of their own.
And this is the first time you've moved away from fiction.
Yes.
How was that experience?
I do feel that writers should constantly evolve. And I felt like it was a challenge for me to move away from fiction. I've done 3 books before this. The first book came out almost a decade ago now, and it was penned, I think, in a month, and then from a month to 4 years now of very heavy-duty research. So I do felt like it was really a journey. Just writing the book was a journey, evolving from a fiction writer to a non-fiction writer, to taking up serious topics. Okay. And I think that's what you have to do always, just keep on evolving.
So is India in love?
Yes, we are falling in love, left, right, and center. We're all dropping like dominoes in this country. Mm-hmm. But it was a fantastic journey. I mean, the kind of stories that I heard were so revealing, were so insightful about the love revolution that's happening in our country. And I really chart this out very carefully in the book. I talk about the 2 really parallel revolutions that we're going through, the love revolution and the sex revolution, and how these 2 coincide with each other and how they overlap at some points in time. I've taken a lot of, of course, statistics, data, expert interviews, and of course, real life narratives to illustrate what we're going through.
So when we talk of love, Ira, and how we understand it or probably don't understand it, use it, misuse it, abuse it, has there been a change in how you have seen love?
I think love is such a nebulous term, right? It's an overarching nebulous term which means so many different things to so many different people. So of course, in this particular book, I'm looking at romantic love. And I do think that the way that romantic love has become a part of young India's day-to-day dialogue is very important. I think even the generation before me, love was never love. It was good if it came around, but there was always a very simple formula. You get married. If you don't fall in love, then you lead a life of mutual respect. But that's changed. Today, young Indians, they want a really heartfelt romantic life. They want what they see on the screens of Bollywood, and they want to take those things and make it their own.
In terms of demographics, India is really layered now. Mm-hmm. And we have the various demographics wanting their take on how they see and live their life, including relationships, okay, which include love. So were there some thoughts and myths in your mind that you had that, 50-year-olds see it like this, and 40-year-olds and 20-year-olds see love differently? And generationally, how is that changing? Did those changes happen with you, and how you saw that?
I think what's happened is that there is a distinct generational shift. And this is because of the internet, it's because of technology, it's because of television, it's because of the sort of economic boom and consumerism that we have seen in urbanization over the past 10 years. So in the underbelly of this economic revolution, we've had a very big cultural revolution. But I do think that it is it is a younger demographic which has changed, but the older demographic has had to change with them. And that's why we see a lot of conflict as well. We see a lot of family conflict. We see it in our sort of, in the newspapers with honor killings and cup panchayats. We see it with, violence and harassment. So it's all around us. It's this conflict. It's this sort of tumultuous time that we're going through, as all revolutions do. So coming back to your question, I do think that everyone has had to evolve. Parents, children, colleagues, bosses, we've all had to change.
All right. So one is to change in terms of how we see the other's need. Is there a change in how people see their own need changing?
Absolutely. As you'd asked me earlier, how do we see love? How do we perceive love? I think it's a great need. And I think looking at marriage, which is what I decided to do, right? I've spent half the book looking at love in marriage, looking at love marriage versus arranged marriage. So in the past 5 to 7 years, in urban India, the percentage of love marriage has gone from 5% to close to 30%. This is a huge shift. In fact, this has never happened before in the near history of our country, where there's been such love marriage at this level, where caste is no longer an issue, where parents are not looking at they kind of still do astrology and all of those things, where it's really the decision of the younger generation to get married to someone of their own choice and someone who they have fallen in love with.
All right. So one is to use love as a benchmark or as a means of getting into a relationship and then taking it forward. The other bit is about sustainability. Any realizations on that?
Well, talking about sustainability and coming back to marriage again, as love marriage has increased, so has divorce. There's no national figure on divorce. We don't calculate one figure like the US does, but we have statewide divorce rates. And it's actually pretty crazy if you look at a state like Kerala. It's 300% increases. In a place like Bangalore, it's 250% increases. In Delhi, 7 years ago, there was 3 family courts which handled divorce. Today there's 17. It's just the sheer number of the volumes of people who are getting divorced. Now, some people say, hey, is this because of love marriage? So you hear this rhetoric all the time that it's because of love marriage that there's divorce, but that's not really the case. It's also because women have those options. They have the freedom to get divorced. There's also a lot of changing expectations in marriage. Women and men want a lot more than maybe my parents did.
And they are getting more articulate about what they want.
I think, being a woman myself and maybe relating to women, some of the people who I met, but the same is for men as well. People want a best friend. They want a soulmate. They want someone who's great in bed, but they also want some of the old traditional things. They also want to be part of a family. They also maybe want the support of a mother-in-law and a father-in-law. So they kind of want both, but is that really possible? Is it possible to have, the East and the West, tradition and modernity? So, and I've said this before, that's why I think forming relationships, particularly marriage, is very hard in 2014, possibly harder than it's been before.
Right. So when the ask is more and so high, expectations are high, and the level of disappointment is also high, do you think there's a link to how we tolerate inadequacy?
I think so. And so, yes, okay, so coming back to that this brings an interesting story in my mind, which I've actually written about in the book. It's about a young man, who's grown up. He's a college student, and his whole life, he's looked at women as good girls and bad girls. The women who are virgins, who are good, and the women who are bad, who go out and they drink and they may party and they sort of want to marry one, but they lust for the other.
Okay.
And then at some point, they realize that you can have both of these paradigms in one, and that's actually, in the story that I said, this guy, when he realizes how much in love he is, and when he breaks up when his relationship breaks up, he's not able to tolerate it. And this is not just a one-off story. Looking at statistics, in the world, youth suicide is one of the highest rates in India. And one of the largest reasons for suicide is love suicides. It's when young people can't handle these these love stories. They have had, their parents haven't had them. Not many people around have had them. So this first generation of young Indians really falling in love, and we're seeing the repercussions.
Right.
And of course, Bollywood plays a big part. We see, these heroes, really doing anything, giving up their lives for these women, and it's kind of this, that's always been a feature of Bollywood film. So I think that too is kind of, yeah.
You've written fiction, which is again a safe way of writing. You've now, cataloged people's stories and your experiences, which is again a little distant and a little safe. Which part of you features in your writing?
So when I started writing this book, I thought there was going to be a lot more of me in the book. I said, listen, I'm one of the reasons I decided to write this book is because I was on this merry-go-round. I was back in India in my 20s. There was a lot of pressure on, as there is in all Indian girls, to get married, to find a partner. It was happening to everyone around me. So so this is one of the reasons I started looking at this, and I became fascinated by this. I too am part of the sexual revolution. It is this generation which is really leading it. But as I progressed with the book, I realized that so many of the stories that I heard, of these hundreds of interviews that I conducted, so many of these stories were so much more interesting than my own. I said these examples, really, they're soulful, they're insightful, they're revolutionary stories. What's mine compared to these? So actually, after the first draft, I took out, when the edits were happening, a lot of the stuff that went away was me. It was cutting out paras and paras of myself. But that said, there's still things, constantly throughout the book I keep on referring back to my own life, to my own relationship that I was in the time of this book. In fact, I remember, I was interviewing people for divorce, and I said, oh my gosh, I have these problems in my relationship. Like, what does this mean? So there's a constant kind of personal journey, though at some point I had to tell myself, listen, step away. You're not going to be able to do this in a very neutral way. You're not going to be able to write about it if you're constantly, thinking and relating yourself to these stories.
The great Indian love story, there's no love on Wall Street, Indian love. Love seems to be a recurring theme in what you write.
I guess that's true somewhat. Yeah, I guess that's somewhat true. I think my previous books have always been, satires on love, right? And I think this book 2 is like that. It's not really a satire, but it does show us, the different sides of love. It shows us kind of whether it's, I'm talking to sex workers, there's an entire chapter on prostitution, whether it's homosexuality, whether it's love in marriage, whether it's love in an open marriage, whether it's, going to a swingers club and seeing the kind of people who are participating in that with their partners. There's a chapter called Modern Love, in which I talk about all these new paradigms of relationships, which one would never have thought exist at this large scale in this country. So I do think I've explored love, primarily through these relationships and marriage. So I think, yes, maybe it's always been an area of interest.
As a writer, the process of growth and evolution is always, I think, somewhere at the back of your mind saying, am I also growing? Because appreciation comes your way, you get recognition, and that can also stop your growth. So what do you do to take a step back and say, okay, so is my readership growing, or am I also growing?
Well, I think that's a good question. I think, as a writer, when you have a book coming out, it's kind of like giving birth at some extent. It's kind of like you've given birth to something, and now this thing has its own life. So you really have to set your expectations at bay. You have to expect. You as you said, it's you can't always expect fame and fortune. That's not the way it is. And I've experienced that with 3 of my books. It's been almost a decade now that I've been writing and slowly been growing in that journey. But with this particular book, it was different because I think writing of the book was such a journey. And I remember after I wrote this book, I said, no matter what happens with this book, just writing the book has taught me so much. I got what I needed just by doing this book. So if fame comes my way, or fortune comes my way, or whatever, all of that stuff happens, it's all just, it's a bonus.
Ira, in terms of inspiration for writing in the next topic, where do you derive that from?
In all of my books, though they were fiction, though they were cloaked in fiction, they were often from my own life, whether it was my experiences in a beauty pageant, or it was The Great Indian Love Story, which was a story, a very dark love story of someone who I knew, a tragic love story, or There Was No Love on Wall Street, which was based on my own experiences working on Wall Street. But for this book, I had to step a little bit away because though it began with my stories of me being part of this generation, as an Indian woman, really leading this revolution that we're going through, this social revolution, a lot of the stories in this particular book are the stories that I heard that are greatly inspiring. You know, I listened to close to 600, and I was so amazed at how people really opened up. They opened up with their stories, with their lives, with their families, with their homes. And people often ask me, were people willing to talk to you about things like their sex lives and their love lives and their divorce and their marriage problems? And I said, and I've told them that it was amazing how much people want someone to listen. You know, people are desperate for someone to be able to just listen to them and not judge them. And that's what I did throughout this book, whether it was talking to sex workers or homosexuals who were still in the closet. I just found that these stories were amazing and greatly inspiring.
And I think also when somebody listens without judgment, you know, and that's when you want to open up and speak, because finally, where you're alone, you're happy to have somebody walk in without judgment.
Absolutely, and for almost a year and a half, and even till today, I have, I had a whole new set of friends. All the characters in my book, they were my friends. They were on my WhatsApp and my email and my phone calls, and I was hanging out with them and their families. My friends in Delhi and stuff say, "Hey, where have you disappeared? Do you still live in this country, in this city?" I said, "Yes, I do, but now I've kind of got a new social set."
So did you get a slight change on how you see yourself? Did that happen?
Absolutely. I think in every story that I heard, but when I actually started writing these stories, when you write something, you not just hear it, but you digest it. Before you can write anything, you have to digest it and analyze it. And these words are a part of yourself. And when I did that, I felt like often, especially when I met young couples, there's a chapter on matchmaking. So spending hours and hours and weeks sitting with the marriage broker, who was arranging marriages for people, and I had so many young men, young women come and talk to them about the kind of people that they wanted to marry. In fact, I myself went on dates with prospective grooms because the marriage broker said, just kind of do it. So I think definitely there was a whole shift in the way I was approaching relationships, how I was looking at my own love life, my own search for a partner. So absolutely.
You pushed your boundaries.
I completely pushed my boundaries.
Okay. Other than this book, you're known as a chick lit writer. This categorization, how comfortable or uncomfortable are you with it?
Sometimes I kind of miss it. This book is not chick lit. It's nonfiction. It's literary nonfiction, and these days I've been doing a lot of serious writing for serious publications, and because this book is steeped in history, sociology, mythology, and whatnot. But I have a large readership for my previous books. A lot of young men, young women. And I still go, I make a point to go to colleges. I go to at least 2 colleges a month. I go to colleges from everywhere, from Ranchi to Kharagpur to, Trichy, remote places. I go and I talk to students and I talk to them about my books. So I feel, and they're reading these books. I still get at least a few messages a day, whether it's on Facebook or Twitter saying, we loved some of your previous books. And so that's not an audience that I want to let go of, and I do think, and I sort of get emails saying, "Hey, when's your next book coming out?" So I do think that my next book will be a novel. It will be for that sort of young readership, which I really love. I think it's a really dynamic. India is growing so fast. These young people are, they have these aspirations, and they're in this changing time, and it's really exciting to see how this evolution is taking place. And I definitely would continue to want to be a part of that.
Right, and it's a readership that loves you too. So, want to thank you, Ira, so much for helping us push our boundaries, because Indian Love is going to do that for a lot of us, because you've gone to areas where some people want to tread, some don't, some are a little shy of that, and you've kind of just put it together so wonderfully with, I think, a little innocence, which is so critical to it, and being non-judgmental. That is so brilliant. Congratulations once again, and thank you for coming on our show.
Thank you very much. I hope that we not just push our boundaries, but kick them out of the park.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Jerry Pinto, and I've just translated Sachin Kundalkar's debut novel, Cobalt Blue. With me is Sachin Kundalkar, so you have the translator and the translated together in the same frame at the same time. Sachin, tell me, when you started writing the novel, you must have been, what, in your late teens?
Yeah, I was about 23 or something, and I didn't set out to do a novel. I was writing a story per se. There was a story in my mind, and without any structure, without any formal thought of what it would be, I just kept writing, finished the first part, and then just stayed there for read it out to friends, and then second started flowing in, and I completed it, and somebody told me that it's a novella. So I said, okay, it's a novella.
So tell me about that moment. You were reading it to friends in Pune, in Bombay. Where was this?
I remember first reading it to Sumitra Bhave and Sunil Suktankar, with whom I used to work. I used to assist them. Chetan Datar heard it, and the grand moment was one afternoon when Vijay Tendulkar called me and he said, "You have written something and I want to hear it." And I was shaken. I was completely, I don't know what to do. I went to him, and that was the first kind of serious reading, I think, that happened, because I was nervous. I realized that this is something which matters per se. It's not a friend zone anymore. It's a writer calling you, and so I read the first part, and he was tired. This dear old man, dear friend he was, and so he said, second part we'll read tomorrow. And I think he called me at 6 o'clock in the morning, and he told me that how he enjoyed it, and I should pursue it. I shouldn't be lazy, should be writing more drafts, and do not let any literary publishing tradition affect it. So protect it from what's happening in Marathi. Yeah, so I didn't even understand what he was saying, but that was a grand moment for me to realize that it matters. What I have written does matter.
And I came across the book when Shanta Gokhale wrote a piece in the Indian Express where she talked about books that mattered to her in regional languages, in this case Marathi. And she talked about Sachin Kundalkar's Cobalt Blue. So I went looking for the book. I walked around Dadar, bought it, and read it in a night, and realized that what I really liked about it was, one, it was an urban novel, which seems to be rare in Marathi fiction. And second, it had the conversational, elegant, spare style of something that I would have liked to have written myself. And I think that's the moment when actually a novel and a translation catches fire. When you say, you know, that's the kind of book I'd like to write myself. And so then I worked on it, and we seem to have had a very amicable relationship.
Easy, yeah. My first, like the first launch has been good.
So I sent him the draft, and he had a few minor changes that we had to make. We really should actually invent a story about these fights, and
Correct.
you know, so that
because
we
that never
actually
happened.
put some masala together.
Correct.
Yeah,
correct.
say we didn't
All
talk for 6 months or something.
Yeah.
But actually, we had a couple of meetings in coffee shops where, as Sachin says, we were supposed to be talking, but we gossiped a lot about
Correct.
friends and whatnot. And I kept asking him,
No,
what
because
is
the
Rani
first,
Mukherjee really like?
No, it happened because the first draft that you brought in had a sounds and smells of textures of the original thing intact, because you owned it, and so yeah, I was sorted. So there's no point in, just for the sake of it, putting your foot down for something which is already there. So yeah, I really feel happy and lucky for that period of time, because I know what relationships translators and authors face. I've heard about it, I've read about it, Also the translators, authors, and the publishers' face. I think we had
Yeah,
a
we
smooth
just
sail
had very smooth.
on every aspect.
Yeah. And, so Sachin, the only question is what's the next thing that's coming up?
I'm doing a novel after a decade or more. It's called Amma, and yeah, so I'm writing. The first draft is on. So by Diwali, I've promised myself I'll finish the first draft, and this time I'll call it novel, because Cobalt Blue still is it's a story, and it's much of a vertical work. And now I realize that I may choose a narrow area here, but I have to go deep down in terms of creating a more complex civilization. I don't have to travel horizontally too much, but I would prefer to travel down like a bow well, go deeper. So that effort is on, and I'm really enjoying trying to put on a discipline around it. And yeah, so by the way.